If you're not paying attention to what Minnesota's doing since Thanksgiving, you're missing one of the best runs in the league.
It is the greatest road win in the history of regular season NBA.
The Timberwolves are 17-6 over that stretch, the best record in the NBA. Not only are they winning, but they are winning in a brand new, when you actually sit down and watch them, the defense looks more disciplined, Anthony Edwards is playing with far more efficiency, and the whole roster feels focused on the same game plan. This isn't the same team that spent the early part of the season trying to figure itself out. Something has shifted for this team. If you're still sleeping on the Wolves as a real title threat, then it's time to wake up. Think about the start of the year. Minnesota wasn't collapsing or anything. They were winning, staying competitive, doing the things good teams do. But there was a noticeable inconsistency. One night, they'd look like a top 5 group. The next, they'd take a off night and make you wonder who showed up. That emotional roller coaster that's haunted this franchise for a long time was still there. Then Thanksgiving hit and everything changed. Suddenly, they're one of the best teams in the NBA. Now, it hasn't been flawless. We saw a particularly ugly moment on New Year's Eve in Atlanta. The Wolves were getting throttled. With about 8 minutes left, coach Chris Finch pulled the starters. Anthony Edwards didn't like it. He visibly threw his hands up and left the bench. And that was tough to watch with family in the stands in his home state. Finch called it unacceptable afterwards and said Ant needed to stay on the floor and support his teammates.
It's obviously frustrated with the performance, and rightfully so, but he needs to stay out on the floor.
For a second, it felt like that could be a real problem. But instead of turning into a distraction, it was handled internally, and the team bounced back with some of their best basketball. Finch talked about this. These little bumps happen around the league, and you have to move past them. So what actually changed? First and most obvious is Anthony Edwards. This season, he's taken a step that's easy to see when you watch and also shows up in the stats. He's scoring efficiently, but more importantly, he's making smarter reads. He's not just a volume scorer who attacks the rim. He's improved his mid-range game, his three-point range, his finishing at the basket has gotten better, and he's making more high-quality decisions when defenses collapse on him. There was a lot of off-season and in-season work on his mid-range and post-game. You can see that practice paying off in the way he attacks closeouts and finds teammates out of double teams. You get a perfect example of that maturity when you remember the shot he hit over Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio, facing a 7'5" defensive whammy, and in the heat of a comeback from 15 points down, Edwards pulled up with total confidence and buried the dagger. That's not just skilled shooting, that's a player who believes in his process in crunch time. During this 17-6 run, he's been shouldering that load night after night. But championships aren't won by one guy taking over every scoring possession. You need an identity that holds up when shots aren't falling. For Minnesota, that identity has become defense. And a big reason for that is Rudy Gobert. What Gobert provides this year is almost a textbook example of why you build around an elite rim protector. With Gobert on the floor, Minnesota defends like a top-tier championship caliber team. Without him, they're more vulnerable. That on-off split is massive. He's not just swatting shots at the rim, he's shrinking the paint, changing how opponents attack the basket, and forcing teams into tougher looks. During this hot stretch, their ability to grind out close games and survive nights when the offense sputters has been rooted in Gobert's presence. In playoff basketball, when possessions get precious and half-court offense rules, having someone who fundamentally alters shots at the rim is huge. Put Edwards' offensive growth and Gobert's defensive deterring together, and you've got a strong foundation. But you still need complementary pieces to carry out a consistent game plan. And what's made this stretch feel different is that the supporting cast has bought in and embraced defined roles. Karl-Anthony Towns has been critical to that. He's been steady all season as a primary scoring option and a secondary creator. When defenses funnel attention to Edwards, Towns is comfortable operating as the guy who can punish mismatches in the post and make plays out of double teams. That balance of scoring and playmaking gives Minnesota another dimension offensively. Edwards doesn't have to do it alone. Towns can take over when he has a mismatch, and he can also make the pass that breaks the defense open. Jaden McDaniels deserves recognition here too. Quietly, he's been excellent on both ends. Efficient with his looks and a rising presence from three. Pair his length and switchability with Gobert's paint protection kits, and you've got a defense that can switch across positions and take away a lot of options for opposing offenses. That kind of versatility is infuriating for opponents. Then there's the relentless energy from the bench and role players players see the team's scrappy guard has become the emotional engine, the guy who won't let mistakes linger and forces the team to play with intensity every night. Coach Finch describes the mentality as next play. You don't dwell on errors, you immediately start competing for the next possession. After a rough loss earlier in the season, one of the Wolves' role players summed it up. We can't rely on talent every night. The energy and competitive spirit has to be there. The compete factor is the biggest thing. That attitude has spread across the roster. When a role player is that engaged, it raises the standard for everyone else. Naz Reid has been an absolute boon off the bench, giving the Wolves instant offense and much needed energy. He's been a sixth man caliber spark who changes the game when he's in, and Bones Highland has chipped in solid minutes with important contributions. The real secret to this run is that these guys are doing their jobs at the same time. That rarely happens where everyone's clicking, not just the stars, but the role players too. Depth and cohesion around a superstar and a defensive anchor make a team much tougher to beat. Now we get to the question everyone is asking. Is this real or just another Minnesota hot streak destined to fade once the pressure rises? Skepticism is fair. The franchise has a long history of inconsistency and heartache. They'll look like contenders one night and then get sloppy against a lesser opponent the next. That pattern hasn't completely disappeared. They did stumble against Brooklyn and got smacked in Atlanta, but there are reasons to believe this feels different. For starters, Minnesota is one of the few teams in the league with both a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. That balance is rare, and it's the kind of profile you see from legitimate title contenders. Most squads are elite on one end and mediocre on the other. The Wolves are strong on both. They've been particularly reliable in the fourth quarter, and when games tighten down the stretch, they have a superstar who wants the ball and has shown he can deliver. That's everything you want in clutch moments. They also look like a team that understands how playoff basketball plays out. They've shown an ability to handle teams they should beat, limiting the dumb slip-ups that used to derail seasons. Against top-tier opponents, they've demonstrated they can compete, hang with the best, and win the games that matter. These are the incremental improvements you need to take the next step as a franchise. This season's Wolves feel like a different franchise identity compared to past iterations. For years, the conversation was the same. Talented, but too hot and cold. Not quite championship caliber. Now Edwards is playing like a top 5 level talent on many nights. Gobert's defensive influence is historically meaningful, and the role players have embraced clear, effective roles. When all those pieces click at once, you stop being an intriguing storyline and start being a legitimate threat. So where do they go from here? Can they sustain this level of play through the stretch run and into the playoffs? That's the big unknown. Depth, health, and focus will all be critical. And there's the practical question everyone's debating. Do they need to bring in a true primary point guard before the trade deadline to smooth some offensive possession control? Or is the current group good enough with the way they're functioning now? That discussion will rage until the deadline passes. But as of today, you have to respect what the Timberwolves are building. They've solved a lot of the consistency problems that used to define them. They're balanced on both ends. They have a superstar who's grown up in his game, an intimidating defensive centerpiece in Gobert, and role players who understand and accept their jobs. That's not the recipe for a one-week run. That's the blueprint for a team that can be dangerous in the postseason. What do you think? Can Minnesota keep this up and make a serious playoff run? Should they be shopping for a primary point guard before the deadline? Leave your takes in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like and subscribe for more. I'll be watching the Wolves closely, and you should too.